and the start of the news review. I have two guests this morning joining the conversation. Kojo Poku is an energy analyst. He's also on the committee for energy, the campaign team for energy, or committee on energy for the Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia presidential bid. He joins the conversation. We also have Wisdom Kofi Dogbe, a finance analyst. And I just want to say this, Wisdom, I know you're going through a lot right now, which we can't share on air, but and you've had to wake up very early because you're across the world. But thank you for making the time to join us this morning. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ben. How are you?
I am well. How about you?
I'm very well. The rate at which you now know this number of head, I'm sure you've been booking a lot of appointments, eh?
How do you know I'm not reading the number?
I don't know, because you don't seem to blink. You're just basically bringing it from the memory. So I think you've been booking that appointment quite often.
Well, not for me, obviously. There you go, starting the day on a mischievous note. Bakojo, it's good. It's always good to have you join the conversation. Same with you, Wisdom. Gentlemen, let's quickly get your thoughts. Make them pretty brief. There's a whole lot to digest, and we have extra time so that we can make the most of the time. Kojo, I'll start with you. Thoughts for us this morning? Any brief thoughts? A minute and a half.
I actually sent you a message. I think there's something that Joy should do. I think when you guys are presenting, the same way you guys put our names, I think you should put your names, the producers should put your names under the host. I think it helps your viewers know the names of the host, because you know that instance where somebody thought when I was calling Madam Sweetie Abochi Sweetie, and the person, one Amelia Amemate, put me on Facebook that I was being condescended. And she didn't know that Sweetie was actually called Sweetie Abochi. So I think it will help if you guys put your names, when you are hosting, your names keep coming up beneath you, so to let people know what your names are.
All right. Thank you for the suggestion. All right. I do know that you were adding in that conversation, and I think the lady, I went and saw the post. She was saying, Sweetie, I think for her, Kojo, I'm not trying to defend it, but for her, she heard you say Sweetie, and then she heard you say a lot of my dear, my dear, my dear. So she felt a bit, that tag, and it has a certain connotation in certain contexts, or generally. I mean, let's assume here at work, I wouldn't go around calling her my dear and all of that. So I had a conversation with some others, and they also said, okay, that's a problem. So, Kojo, maybe we can just stick to her name, and that is it. That's just on the lighter side.
I don't think the problem was with the my dear. The problem was she said that I keep calling her Sweetie. So let's not diverge from what the problem is. She didn't know her name was Sweetie.
Oh, I think she mentioned the my dear bit as well.
Yes, she mentioned that as well. But what I'm saying is that her concern, if you read the post was to say that we need to teach our men and children manners. I mean, she doesn't know. So let's put it out there and let her know that the lady is called Sweetie Abochi. Yeah. I will not come on TV and call somebody Sweetie. I've been doing TV for 12 years, and I'm very versed on manners.
Right. Thank you so much. But let me also say this for everybody out there. Sometimes, please don't take matters too hard out of context. If you don't know something, don't say what you don't know. I felt a bit bad when I read that comment, and all you could have done was check what's the lady's name, and all that would have ended. But thank you, Kojo, for your thoughts. Let me go to Wisdom. Quick thoughts. Any quick reflections for us this morning?
Sure, Kojo, nice to meet you. And I would say that actually happened to me. Somebody asked me, why did you call her Sweetie? And I had to say that that's her name. In my case, it didn't end in any kind of argument. It was a simple question, and I just had to answer that. But Ben, I said, let me go to my topic for this morning. I said it a few times here that I like to support causes that promote diversity and also equity, including empowering women and also supporting the underprivileged minorities in our society. So evidently, I would support this affirmative action bill that seeks to ensure gender equality, if it takes a fair and also inclusive approach within the confines of the Constitution. Now, I heard briefly that the former minority leader in Parliament, he had concerns about the bill because certain provisions in the bill blatantly violate the provisions in the Constitution. And I need to understand that, right? What exact provisions that he was talking about. But I'll be surprised if anyone would craft a bill with provisions that contravene the laws of the land. So if that is the case, I will hope that the framers of the bill will get back to the drawing board,
right?
Clearly define what the goals and objectives of the affirmative action bill are, including what is what they are trying to identify and calling out in the specific areas where we still have gender inequalities, such as leadership representation in positions that require appointment and not election. Because for elected positions, the principle of fairness and competition will not always support much of an affirmative action here. So I think Parliament can enact into laws provisions that require policies or implementation of policies and practices that will promote inclusivity and also reduce bias against women and the disabled. But I'm doubtful that Parliament can actually pass in a bill that will not survive the test of the Constitution.
Well, thank you, Wisdom, for your thoughts. Let's get quickly into the papers now. I'll start with the Ghanaian Times newspaper, and we'll do some online portals at the end of this conversation. So 2024 election, don't endorse presidential candidates. Clergy admonished. There's also Communications Minister launches foundation to empower youth and women. And Ghana's Eurobond holders reach agreement with government on debt restructuring. I've been listening to the finance minister and some of what he's been saying, which left me scratching my head. And I was wondering, Dr. Amin Adam took over, and interesting setup. We've been supporting him, and all of a sudden I'm hearing him saying certain things, and I'm wondering, is he feeding into the politics? And then you would hear, Professor... it's not Awandare, the other one, I'll get his name, also making mention, and others, that we don't know where these figures are coming from, and it's lopsided. But we'll get into that. GOC unveils plans to mark Olympic Day. In Swatriman FC win MTN FA Cup. They claimed their first major trophy after beating Bofuakwatano by 5-4 on penalties to win the 2023-2024 MTN FA Cup on Sunday at the University of Ghana Stadium in Legon. I've noticed a few things, though, about the University of Ghana Stadium, and I'm wondering, how much did we say we expended again? Was it 30-something million or something like that? I don't know. There was a figure. I think that was the total, but there was a figure for the stadium, even though it was done before the All-African Games. I'm wondering whether we're going to keep up with those investments so that it doesn't become another one of those. You do it, and then after a short while, it starts to deteriorate. GPL, DOL clubs urged to acquire SNIT clearance certificates. All of that in sports. But let's get to some of the major issues. I'll start from page 8, then go to page 9 as well. With campaign trails for the 2024 general elections gathering momentum by the day, the clergy has been admonished to avoid predicting victory for and endorsing presidential candidates to prevent factionalism in the church. According to the moderator of the General Assembly of the Evangelical Presbyterian Church Ghana, Right Reverend Dr. Lieutenant retired Bliss Agbeko, disunity in the church would affect the country's peace. Quoting him, he says, "What we as church leaders need to do now is to continue to pray with our congregations to allow God to choose our leaders through us." He told the Jolo Bogame congregation of the church in the Ho West District on Sunday. Now, Right Reverend Agbeko was delivering a sermon on the theme, Patience and Peace in Personal Storm. This brings to mind many things. And these are my thoughts before I come to you, gentlemen. If you want to talk about politics and leaders, then talk about all of them. Don't be like some of those who in the past would speak under a certain administration and would not speak now. Speak all the time, which is my policy. The other bit is, if you want to stick your neck out and do that, then also know that some people are not going to be very fair in their assessment of you. And you should understand that before you go there. Also note, your congregations are not only from one end. They are from different spectrums. So don't expect that if you preach a certain way, I don't know, but there are so many dynamics, and sometimes I don't get why some of our preachers, instead of staying neutral, want to expose themselves, and then when they catch, fire, they act a certain way. Maybe later I'll talk about Women's Aglow and some of the prayers they've been praying now and all of that. But I'll start with you, Wisdom Dogbe. Thoughts?
Well, I think that the church has a key role to play when it comes to educating folks on how to vote and what are the issues they should be thinking about, right? So, but to your point, I do believe that they also have to remain neutral. But I also want to segue a little bit to a call by the former General Secretary of the Christian Council of Ghana. His call was to improve the election process. And I think that is a good call, especially with all of the challenges that the EC has experienced in the voter registration exercise and also other activities of the EC. I would take it a step further, right, to say that improving the elections really is not the responsibility of only the EC, but all the stakeholders, including the media, the religious bodies, just like you mentioned, and also the general public. Everyone has to do their part to improve the election process and to ensure a free and fair elections and also peaceful transfer of power. Then, I think that this call from Rev. Punifrimpo, I think that's the name, from the clergy, I think that will resonate with the voters. If you think about the role of the clergy in moral guidance, in conflict resolution, and also in peace education, it becomes clear that their roles and also their voices are very, very significant in these elections.
Right.
But we have few cases of public officials, right, and also institutions such as the EC are missing opportunities to show fairness and also transparency in some instances. And that is why this call is very relevant. I heard about significant lapses on the part of the EC and how they reported inaccurate numbers in some instances. Thankfully, some of these have been corrected. But these things don't give Ghanaians the assurance that they can fully trust the key institutions of government to deliver fair and also transparent elections. And also, lastly, right, the EC has been getting quite some negative attention, especially during the voter registration exercise. But to be honest, it is the wrong timing for them to be on the news for these issues. We are in an election year, and it is imperative on them to do all that it takes to gain the trust of the public and the confidence of the people ahead of the elections.
Thank you for those thoughts. Kojo?
My brother, I don't see where and how pastors all of a sudden are not supposed to be part of politics. In the distant future, the church was the politics. The two have piggybanked each other for a very long time. And I don't know why anybody thinks that a pastor or a clergy cannot basically have a political view. They can and they should. What my leader, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, has done when we went around the 16 regions, the first thing we did in every region is to engage the clergy and the men of God and the people who lead these faith-based organizations. And the strategy was clear. You need to let the people who lead the folks, the people who basically stand in the pulpit to preach, understand the message that you are bringing. Because every Sunday, twice a week, they stand in front of this congregation and they basically preach to the people. So they also need to understand the policy of the politics, not just the hearsay. If they are well informed, then they can give a very solid view if they choose to go that way. And that is why the DMV campaign engaged all the clergy. Now, if a clergy buys into a message and decides to basically profess in a certain direction, there's nothing wrong with it. We have had so many instances where the church and the politics have gone hand in hand. So I don't see why all of a sudden we want to now come in and say, oh no, pastors should not be into politics and they should be in the middle. Where does it say that?
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. I never said anywhere that pastors or men of the cloth, in fact, I'm Catholic, so I know this very well. I don't know the last time you saw a Catholic priest or a reverend sister going out there espousing political thoughts. But they do vote, don't they? The point is that I hear depending on what I see. I have my political thoughts. I have my political leanings, depending on who's in power, who's trying to get in power, and what is happening in the country. Do I go espousing my political thoughts? No. The point I am making, just as with chiefs, religious leaders don't go acting like I am clearly here, I'm clearly there. They will vote. They will express their political opinion. No one is taking that away from them. But all I am saying, when you were speaking, I allowed you to speak, Kojo. All I am saying is that if you're going to stick your neck out and say, I am for Mahama, or I am for Bawumia, or show clearly, then also be ready for what comes with it. After all, and there are many, the Eastwood Annabes and so many of the others. Do you hear them espousing any political thoughts? But don't they preach about the state of the country? Don't they preach about goings on in the country, detaching themselves from politics, but yet talking about it? That's all I'm saying. So this bit about, and can they get political and all of that, I don't understand.
When you mention the chiefs, there is a constitution provision.
I mentioned them in passing. I know that pastors are not mentioned in the constitution.
I allowed you to talk. Let me land. The chiefs, there's a constitutional provision that says that chiefs should not. There is no constitutional provision that says pastors and clergy should not.
I never said there was.
Let me. The Catholics, look. Clearly, you said one thing, and I agree with you on that. If they stick their neck out, they are sticking it out, and they are ready for the consequences. So I don't think they are oblivious of the fact that what they are doing has consequences. Let's leave the pastors to be pastors.
Okay, let's leave them to do that. Just a correction, Wisdom. So it's not Reverend Frimpong, it's Right Reverend Agbeko. He is moderator of the General Assembly of the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, Ghana, just so you know. Let's get into other stories. GSS launches 8th round of Ghana Living Standard Survey, and the 8th round of the Ghana Living Standard Survey, that is GLSS 8, aimed at providing data on welfare and living conditions of individuals with households in Ghana to help with socio-economic planning, was yesterday launched in Accra. The GLSS is a nationally representative household survey which is conducted by the Ghana Statistical Service every 5 years to provide reliable, disaggregated, and internationally comparable statistics on welfare and living conditions of individuals and households. And let me just give you some detail on that, because we singled out a few of those. I used part of them in my blunt thoughts on Friday. If you look at the data, and I'll just quickly get into it so you can do your analysis on that, and you look at multidimensional poverty statistics, you would find that 7.3 million persons in Ghana are multidimensionally poor. We're talking about education, employment, so many different dimensions. That literally means that 1 in 4 Ghanaians is multidimensionally poor, and there are levels to poverty. That is if you take the population of 30.08 million. Now, 43.8% of the multidimensionally poor persons experience severe poverty. And it goes on when you look at the breakdown. So those who are multidimensionally poor in the employment category, 32.6%. In terms of living conditions, 27.9%. In terms of health and all the dynamics, 21.7%. And in terms of education, 17.8%. I'll leave it there for now. Wisdom, I'll start with you on that. What are your thoughts? And interestingly, because of the numbers, you would find that in the Ashanti region, for example, which is the highest, 959,000 people, almost 1 million people, but it's also because of the population, is the highest. Greater Accra is in third with 627.6K. Any thoughts, Wisdom, before I go to Kojo?
Ben, I would say this, right? I missed this on the news, so I'm not on top of this one, but you mentioned something that really caught my attention. You said 7.3 million people are below the poverty line. That is
they are experiencing multidimensional poverty. If you follow the trend after COVID, post-COVID, we've been told that about 800,000 to 1 million Ghanaians have fallen below the poverty line. But as far as this statistic is concerned, 7.3 million Ghanaians are multidimensionally poor.
Look, I think we need to change course as a nation, right? I've heard the finance minister talking about the Guinean economy being better than previous administrations and all of that stuff. You know, it sounded so good, but then hearing you talk about these numbers here, it gives me a little bit of a chill. Unemployment is still high, right? People are struggling to find jobs. Poverty is a big issue. So I think that we should be pursuing policies that will help our people, bring them out of unemployment, bring them out of poverty, give people equal opportunities. I think that is what the government should be working towards, and not just throwing out rhetoric that the economy is better today. I think anybody who is bold enough to make a statement of that nature, right, that the economy is better today compared to a previous administration where people were much better off, I think that statement is disingenuous, and that is a level of boldness that I wish I had.
All right. Thank you, Wisdom. Kojo?
Well, Ben, I don't think we should, whenever it comes to some of these indexes, we shouldn't be quick to jump at the truth of government, to say that, oh, government is making rhetorics and people are in multi-dimensional poverty index. You know, it is a gauge of people's health, education. There are multifacets that goes into the index that has come out, which is the survey that they do. Clearly, rural Ghana, it's dire. And the reason some of us are getting into politics is to basically bring the living standards in rural Ghana to basically closer. It can't be the same as urban Ghana. But if you go around the country and look at the living standards in the rural communities, that's why when you mention my home region, Ashanti region, I would tend to agree with you, because there is quite a number of rural Ghana in the Ashanti region. And if you go there and you look at the indexes of health, education, and the living standards, it's quite low compared to the index which they are using, which is a global index, okay? So let's not be quick to jump on the truth of
Which
Ghana.
index are you talking about that is the global index?
Well, the multidimensional, the survey they did.
It is not. Just to clarify for you, it is not. Every country has its own. I was actually at the launch. I hosted this event, Kojo. So careful where you go on that. Every country has its own scheme per certain statistical requirements, per certain standards that are to be met, okay? And I'm telling you that this is purely Ghanaian, has nothing to do with any global thing. This is the GSS doing it.
The index, you have to compare, for you to say a certain percentage, you have to have a benchmark, and below that benchmark is what you are classifying. To do any survey, there should be a benchmark. That benchmark was not a local benchmark, it's an international benchmark. The MPI, which is the multidimensional poverty index, is what they use it to basically gauge.
Do you know for how long we've had some of these statistics? And I'm not necessarily, yes, even multidimensional poverty indices, but you know, over the years, over the decades, how many times we've had some generation, whether it's from the census or all that, when it comes to these reports? Do you know?
No, Ben, what I'm trying to point out is that we have a benchmark to which we compare these indexes to grade that 7.1. They didn't come into Ghana and said everybody was multidimensional poor. They said that 7.3 million Ghanaians are in multidimensional. What it means is that they compare the living standard, the educational standard, and the health standard against a certain standard. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the MPI, which is what they use to doing these things, is not a locally developed. But my point is this. Government, and every government for that matter, has really failed to bring out rural development. And that is why there's a need to create more decentralization so that poverty alleviation will go directly to people that need it. And for me, I think that we should go slow when we are quick to blame government on some of these things.
But Kojo, let me ask you this, if you don't mind. Are you saying that, let's get out of the indexes, right, or the statistics of things, and let's talk about things that matter to the average Guinean. Are we saying that because these indexes are usually low for the rural areas, it is acceptable? I don't understand that part.
No, not at all. I never said that. What I'm saying is that the index is an international index. The point I'm trying to point out is that it is a measure of rural standard of living, health, and education. And we all understand that in rural Ghana, these standards are low. One of the things that this government has done, and the creation of the 16 regions, which is 6 more regions to add to the 10, what it has done, it has actually decentralized a lot of these areas. A typical example is the Western North, the Wiosu area. If you go and see the amount of development that they have gotten as a result of they becoming a region, as compared to when they were part of the Western region. So there are steps being done, but obviously, look, nobody said that we're a rich country. We are still a poor country, as we all know. So these things are happening, but I just thought that we should address the problem as a fundamental problem, but not to jump at the throat of government.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I just want to disagree with you on one point. Ghana has never been poor. If you look at natural resource, if you look at the human resource, if you look at everything else we've been given, hold for me. When you're talking, I allow you to talk. Ghana has never been poor. We've had leaders who are bereft of ideas, misleaders who are poor in their thinking. And I'm not singling anyone out. I'm just saying that over time. And it's not to say every last one of them, everyone in the leadership cycle. But I'm saying that we've had leaders who are not futuristic in their thinking. Leaders who say one thing and come and do something totally different. That has been our malaise. Don't tell me Ghana is poor. Ghana is not poor. But let's get into other stories. On page 9 of the paper, Ghana's Eurobond holders reach agreement with government on debt restructuring. And the Committee of Holders of Ghana's Eurobonds, that is the committee, has reached an agreement in principle with the government on a restructuring of the Eurobonds. A statement issued by the committee yesterday and copied to the Ghanaian Times said the proposed agreement on the restructuring of the Eurobonds would address Ghana's default on the Eurobonds in a manner that provided significant cash flow and debt stock relief to support the country's economic recovery in the context of the IMF financial program. And so that is that with that story. As things go on, I think it was one of those entities recently revised its dollar CD rating, stating that it wouldn't be 13 point something anymore. It would be north of 15. I'm just praying, hoping that the CD appreciates against these currencies. It started appreciating a bit, then it lost some 3 point something % last week, and we're back to 15 point, whatever. Now, it's practically 16. The pound is north of 20 if you're buying. If you're selling, it's 19 point something. We need it to come down. Because I have friends who are schooling and paying from here in pounds and dollars. It's a major headache. It's crazy. I have a friend who's had to stop part of a dental program in the UK because, it's moved from what? Look at where it was 2 or so years ago to 20. You can't afford it. So, Dr. Finance Minister and co, yes, you're doing your bit, but let it trickle down because that's where people will feel it. It's really bad. African leaders advised to double efforts towards attainment of SDGs by 2030. The special advisor to the president on sustainable development goals, Dr. Eugene Owusu, has appealed to global leaders to double down on their efforts towards the attainment of the SDGs by 2030. According to him, this had become necessary because despite the SDGs going past its midpoint of the time frame for implementation, not much had been achieved. And you know what's interesting? If you look at the SDGs, the first 3, you're looking at no poverty. We have, I'm sure, per the multidimensional poverty index, the indices we've been referencing, it is clear. If Kojo wants to go there, I would let him know that, in fact, it was admitted while this MPI was being launched. Then you come to hunger and all of that. In fact, we are pretty far behind. And not just Ghana, Africa, there's a lot of work to be done. I'll just let me look for this and add it, then I can take your reflections and move to another paper. 50 people infected with HIV daily in Ghana, Dr. Echiahene. And he said that right here on this show. So the new HIV infection is the highest in the Greater Accra with 4,221, followed by the Ashanti with 3,650, Eastern with 2,096, and Northeast with 112 being the lowest. But the sad development is that over 17,000 people got infected just last year. I think about 12,000 of the number generally perished, and we're adding on about 50 every day. It appears a lot of work to be done there too. Kojo, I'll start with you on these points, and then
can
we'll
we
go into
discuss
the
the
next
debt restructuring? Because that's a major story, and I think we should spend some time discussing that. I don't know if you want to go into that, or you want to leave it for a different
You can talk about it. You can go ahead.
Right. Okay, that's good. So it's good news. And you mentioned that the cedi has been depreciation, which is the case when you have a lot of people betting against the currency, thinking that we will not be able to reach an agreement with our debtors in the Eurobond and in the bilateral arrangement. Thank God it's been done. And I think we will see that there will be a decline in there will be appreciation of the currency, because people will realize that now there is relief for the economy. We've been able to make some savings because the coupons, the interest rate on these coupons have been renegotiated. The tenure has been extended, which has yielded some savings to the nation in the long term. So basically, what tends to happen now for me is not what has been achieved by having to renegotiate these debts, because we shouldn't have gotten there in the first place. Some of us are on record in 2017 to say that, look, when we came into 2017, the country was in the IMF program. And the reason was that the previous administration has really run the economy down, and there was a need to change direction when we come out of that IMF program, which we exited in 2018. We didn't do that. And some of us have criticized that decision heavily, that, look, borrowing to solve our problem, which is something that I think is taught in economics and finance class, that you can borrow yourself out of poverty. Ghana, we have gone the long haul and realized that we cannot borrow ourselves out of poverty. What we need to do is to basically come with programs that will help the country, one, balance its budget, spend what we have, and the diverse revenue streams that will help basically generate revenue internally. And that is why some of us are happy to basically sign on to the policy and the philosophy of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia going forward.
All right, but sometimes I find it interesting, especially when aficionados of the MPP go like, oh, we're in the grips of an IMF program. You came and benefited from that program. Some of the indices, the benefits, the boons did not come in maybe 2015, thanks to some of those. I mean, there are the negatives of it. When we speak like there were no benefits, it's a conversation. But anyway,
and let me address that briefly.
Wisdom, please go ahead with your thoughts.
Sorry, can I go ahead?
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so yes, there were benefits, and clearly, I mean, someone like me has always been outspoken on these things. One of the things that post that 2018 IMF we did not continue to build was a resilient economy that can stand shocks. Obviously, post 2018, we went into the market trying to have a certain program that the government wanted to do, not knowing that there was going to be a massive pandemic, which is COVID-19, which happened just 2 years after that, which basically threw the government program off whack. So clearly there were benefits, but those benefits were clearly eroded when we had the national, the international, and the worldwide pandemic.
Wisdom, quick thoughts on that. So I go into the next paper.
Look, when it comes to the Ghana's debt restructuring, right, and agreement with the Eurobond holders to restructure our debt, my thought is that I sincerely thought that it would have been a heavy lift, right, to align and eventually unlock the next disbursement from the IMF. Of course, we needed to make some good progress, Ben, in negotiations with the Eurobond holders. But I was not overly hopeful in terms of pulling off our proposed 40% haircut on the bonds with our Eurobond lenders. But it's great to hear that we got there. 37% haircut is awesome. So this is good progress. And it's an indication that we can possibly expect some improvement in the economy. So all good stuff. But Ben, we need to be mindful, right, how we celebrate this. The haircut is not really a saving from a good management perspective. As the finance minister purportedly described it, we are bankrupt. And our lenders decided to have mercy on us and forgive us part of our debt. I wouldn't pop a champagne over this. We shouldn't be celebrating stuff like that. We should be sober and ask ourselves, how did we get here in the first place? How can we avoid this in the near future? And Ben, what I want to touch on briefly is that We like to say Ghana defaulted based on, we gave excuses because of impact of the Ukrainian war, COVID-19, and also higher global interest rate. Look, that is true to some extent, but I also think that in Ghana, we have such a terrible risk management setup. Actually, no, as far as I know, the government doesn't have any meaningful risk management setup in place to cushion us against some of these market impacts, such as FX exposure and interest rate volatility. So when the finance minister was touting the savings achieved by the government in this restructuring, I think all he was saying is that our creditors have agreed to reduce our debt burden. We need to understand that it's not a savings achieved through sound risk management, nor through any solid debt management policy. We failed and we went bankrupt. And then we begged our creditors and they had mercy on us. That is not real savings here. The next phase of our challenge, Ben, where the rubber will meet the road, is about to start, right? When we start to make interest and also principal payments on the debt that is renegotiated. Would we have the dollars to service the debt? I don't know. And that's why I think we are not yet out of the woods, especially when it comes to stabilizing the city. We need to learn from these things and implement a proper risk management strategy in place when it comes to our borrowing. Look, at some point, quickly, and I'll be done. At some point in my career with one of my previous employers, I led strategic operations to issue debt in the Eurobond market. And when we were thinking through how to stand up the operations and also preparedness for the issuance, some of our key considerations were not just the debt issuance, but also how do we have a comprehensive hedging strategy in place, putting in place strategies such as net investment hedge designation for the translation risk, or leveraging a normal fair value hedge program to mitigate our interest rate exposure. These are the key things you need in place when you start to raise, some of these external debt. And I was quite surprised that Ghana doesn't have some of these comprehensive hedging strategies in place.
Right.
What that means is that you are at the mercy of the global shocks, right? Which can make it difficult for you to service our debt. So I think that is a great milestone that we have achieved, but we should really take a step back and ask ourselves, how did we get here and how can we prevent this going forward?
Daily Guide newspaper now, and I'll go inside before I come outside. Kenya's Ruto agrees for conversation with protesters over tax hikes. Kenya's Ruto agrees for conversation with protesters over tax hikes. I wish we could have more such negotiations here on some of the taxes we have to pay. Over the weekend, I went somewhere, and trust me, the tax burden is huge. Intense phase of war with Hamas about to end. Benjamin Netanyahu pictured there, of course. Hezbollah and the myriad rockets it's been firing into Israel from Lebanon is also in contention. And there's caution about whether there would be an escalation of that development. But getting into the Daily Guide newspaper, NDC lies, deceits exposed. That's according to Godfred Dame. And I'll not focus on the others because we practically touched on them. And I'm not going to go into the closed fishing season beginning July the 1st. It's already very clear. Vigilantism laws to be enforced. So let me just go there, those two quick stories. The Attorney General has been speaking at a town hall meeting with some Ghanaian residents in the UK, and he stated that the NDC's lies, deceptions, and deceits had been exposed. We should resist all the lies, deception, and deceits of the NDC because that is their stock in trade, and I personally can attest to that. He then says their case has crumbled, and as the president will say, the case has fallen into water. That is atonsuum. So indeed, we must resist the deception and lies of the NDC because they will come with all sorts of presentations about every major action or step being taken by this government. So we should be on the lookout. My only reaction, I'm a bit surprised about the Attorney General and some of these comments. By the way, I saw a video of some demonstrators. I don't know whether it's that place where he was having the town hall. I believe so, which is pretty interesting in its own right. Mr. Attorney General, maybe you should leave the court of justice, the court of law, and in a way, the court of public opinion to make your case. I don't know about And one surprise, though, the Ghana Bar Association, nothing said about this. I'm curious because in other instances, much more trivial. We've seen reactions. But anyway, who am I? Or as Chairman Woon to me will say, whom am I? Anyway, that's it. Then I'll just do the story in addition. Page 6. So, 2024 elections, vigilantism laws to be enforced. As Ghana approaches its presidential and parliamentary elections, it's a long, winding bit, but yes, let's enforce the vigilantism laws. But we all know that it will take more than just rhetoric, word of mouth. The New Finder newspaper, $15 billion saved, deferred, paves the way for resumption of stalled projects. I find it interesting when our finance ministers throw all of these things about, because if you go into it, and similar Dawson, but we don't have the time. Economic recovery on course, President Akufo-Addo says, and of course he's designated some new ambassadors to different countries. And Nana Santi Bediato, his executive secretary, is now ambassador at large, which makes me wonder what happened to Dr. Mahama. Is he still ambassador at large? Do you remember? There's also only 4% of SDGs on track for Africa by 2030. That's according to the special advisor, which is what I was pointing to earlier. Out of 100%, only 4% on track. Woeful. Quick thoughts, gentlemen, and we're out of here. I'll give you a minute each. Kojo, starting with you.
Well, I don't think a minute is enough, Ben.
A minute is what we have. Kojo, a minute is what we have.
Let me say that, look, the stalled projects, and when I saw the renegotiation concluded, my heart jumped and I was very excited for our mothers and our sisters and our brothers in Kumasi. Finally, the KJTR market is going to start again.
Your time is ticking.
That project has stalled. Sorry?
Your time is ticking.
Yes, but
as you talk about the market.
So don't interrupt me, please. The KJTR market is going to start again because that financing has stalled because of the renegotiation, because the funding is coming from Germany. So a good news for my people in Kumasi, you should know that that market will start as soon as possible. The issue of what you read, Ben, you held up a very big newspaper. And the biggest story on that front of that newspaper was the 1.5 billion that government is going to pay to people whose money have been stuck in defunct banks. And you didn't mention it. That's the biggest news of the day. The government, the same way we borrowed 2.24 billion Ghana cedis and paid people who have mismanaged their money and put in banks that were not worth putting in. And government paid back those money to Ghanaians. Today, the government of Ghana, Nanado's government, MPP government, is going to pay 1.5 billion to Ghanaians whose money have been stuck. They no longer have to go to Ministry of Finance to demonstrate every day. Now, one of the things that we should celebrate, and what my brother said was that the Ministry of Finance or the Minister of Finance was celebrating. No, he was celebrating the negotiation. They've negotiated well, and he admitted that we've gotten 37% on the renegotiation on the interest or the haircut. Right. So that was what was being celebrated, not necessarily that we want to go back into borrowing again. All
right. Kweku Amwa says, good morning, Ben. Watching live from Italy, you go on and on. This one says, when will the MPP stop blaming the NDC for its woes? Wisdom, I'm sorry, but you have to be very brief so we get out of here. Our time is up.
Ben,
very brief, 40 seconds. I'm giving you 40 seconds, please. Let's go.
Good. When it comes to this ambulance case, I'm not sure why the Attorney General is already concluding that the case is attention.
All right.
I think it's a damning thing for his reputation that, one, right, the court found the tape recording as plausible evidence to admit in court. And secondly, the Attorney General is not in good company of those in his kind of position that the court has advised to recuse from a case. But let me segue briefly and talk about...
Wisdom, we don't have that much time. I'm sorry. We have to wrap it up. Final words. Just wrap up for me. I'm sorry.
Look, what I would say is this, right? This matter should be adjudicated in the court of law. It's not a matter that should be adjudicated in a town hall or something of that nature. That matters in court, and they should respect the proceeding, including the Attorney General himself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Wisdom Dogbe. He is a finance analyst. He joined the conversation. Kojo Poku is an energy analyst. He also joined the conversation.